Okay.
Hi, and welcome to another ISOOSI Chat, our regular roundtable discussion about search, social, and all things marketing. I'm Carlos Fernandez, president of ISOOSI Marketing Agency. And today we have another stellar show lined up for you as we discuss aligning core values with business networking. We have a fantastic panel today. We have quite a few of us today. We have David Amerland. He's author, speaker, analyst, astronaut, juggler.
I just came back from space not 10 minutes ago.
No, basically, you name it, he's done it, and everybody should know David. We have Manny St. Victor. David and Manny have been on our Hangouts before, so you'll recognize them if you've never heard of them before. Shame on you. We also today have Alexandra Gonzales, Alex.
Hello.
Alex, and we joined obviously by our regulars, Bill Slawski, creative director at GoFish, and Ammon Johns, ISOOSI's resident expert on all things marketing, and Eric Stafford, creative director at ISOOSI. And since we have such a talented group of people with us today, it's only fair to let them introduce themselves and give them let them plug whatever they want to plug. Ammon, do you want to kick us off?
Well, I'll kick us off with a very quick topic outline, and this is the fact that with businesses it's important that we be able to deal with a lot of different people, but the thing is, people are different. They have different things that motivate them. Some people will need one thing to convince them that something's great, others just need to know it's in the right colour. So one of the things we're talking about today is how those different personality types react to various stimulus, and most importantly, how your personality type will play into how well you can connect with them. And so understanding your own strengths and weaknesses, your own core values, is going to dictate how well you can do with other things. So let's kick it off in alphabetical order, shall we? Alex, would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh, sure. Alphabetical order usually doesn't work in my favor. It's usually by last name. I'm Alex. If you don't know me on Plus, I put my title as voice of SEO wise, etc. because I just don't know how to introduce myself these days. I'm the voice of SEO wise. I do the paradigm shift with David Amerland, which has been going quite well. I do Glass in the Class because I teach, and I'm also a graduate student at Kent State University in the communication department. So that's pretty much the main reason that I'm here, and I'm super excited. All the audience has been like building this up, and it's made me nervous, but Manny said that I can put my nervousness off on him, and I can take his excitement, so feeling a little bit better.
David.
Well, I was thinking, you know, that's a really neat trick with Alex and money. We can all do that with money. Because he's always super excited. Well, and I'm actually really excited to be here because this is a really good panel, jokes aside. It's very rarely that so many of us come into a panel like this to discuss network dynamics and branding and personalities. And these are things which actually are critical, and they're complex, and usually they get brushed under the carpet because we focus on the easy things. We focus on the metrics and the graphics and the plus ones and the posts and the content and the links. And actually today, I think this is one of the core values of having a platform like ISOOSI, where they essentially bring us together to discuss something which is of so much value in how everything evolves within this platform, that I'm really excited by it, and I'm looking forward to see what comes out of this.
David, you should talk more about how awesome ISOOSI is just for another couple minutes, if you would.
Manny, jump in. Don't feel too nervous. I've only got my notes here in large form.
No pressure. I'm Manny St. Victor. I'm Chief Neuroscientist at Mindful 360, where we take we call a non-pathological, a normalizing approach to getting to know your brain and how it works. I'm also working on a project with Paul Ramsey, the hypnotist, on hypnotic thoughts. and I have an upcoming project which is core value alignment, which is a guide to growing an audience that loves you and identifying who will be your ideal audience.
Awesome. Awesome. Bill, do you want to say anything before we kick straight in?
Sure, really quickly, introduce myself. I'm the Director of Search Marketing at GoFish Digital. I write at SEO by the Sea, and these weekday chats are the closest I get to seeing sunshine during the week, where I get the chance to network with people while juggling 3 or 4 patents I'm trying to write about at the same time. Need more networking, less patents.
Nice, nice. Do you want me to switch to a seaside background for you, so you can feel like you're really getting out?
I was thinking of sliding up the screen that's on the window. It really make me feel like I'm outside.
Excellent. Eric, why don't you give us a quick word or two about ISOOSI to fill in, since David failed to add in the extra 2 minutes there.
I'm so sorry.
I'm happy to do it. Guys, thank you all so much for being here. We really appreciate you being a part of it. As most of you regulars know, Carlos and I run a creative agency. We work with all kinds of big and small companies to help them with their marketing, their SEO, and their conversions, and started the ISOOSI research engine for specifically this purpose, to help other people and pull a bunch of really talented folks together to help each other and to help other people. So I love this topic, and the reason I love today's topic is because, you know, Carlos and I have talked a lot on these Hangouts about how we meet with clients and they're like, we are ready to brand. We're going to get a logo. We're going to brand the hell out of our business, and we got this great idea for a logo. And we always talk to about how, you know, we really try and pull people back and tell them, look, you know, you really need to think about the essence of your business, your core values. It's more than a logo. It's the feeling people get when they touch your brand, whether it's visually or whether it's you know, in print, in TV, however that may be. But I think you know, people like Ammon and Manny and the rest of the guests that we've had over the course of this past year have really shown us that we don't even tell people to pull back far enough. It's not enough to think about your persona or your audience. You have to also think about your persona across all the different channels of your business. You have to think how about it's going to affect your customer support, how it's going to affect your marketing and your logistics and your packaging. And so I love digging deeper on subjects like this, and I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say about it.
I'll just add quickly in that me too. You know, part of the reason I find it such an interesting subject is because, you know, we have all got our own stories about how we started in business ourselves. You know, Eric and I met in the Caribbean, and, you know, we came over to the US. We already had businesses, but, you know, we have our own story, and that story comes through in all your business dealings and the personality of ISOOSI. When Eric and I used to go out and, you know, pitch clients, we were doing the same thing. You know, we had a story to tell, and we had values that had to come across. The other reason I find it very interesting subject is because we deal with, you know, Fortune 100 companies, and we deal with mom and pop shops, really small businesses. And sometimes I feel like the small businesses are in such a better position to get across their persona, to get across their brand, than, you know, the Fortune 100 companies that we deal with, who are just so big and so clunky, and so, you know, it takes them so long to even understand where they're going and their values. That it's, you know, our challenge with those types of clients is to get them to, you know, self-analyze themselves. But again, it's just such a difficult process with them being so big. So, you know, hopefully today we'll discuss how businesses can do that, you know, despite the size of the business. You know, small businesses as well as large businesses.
One of the things that fascinated me years ago, and it just resonated ever since, was a study that was done where they applied personality testing to corporate identities. Basically, the whole point of a corporation is that it's an embodiment. It's giving a personality to a company. And when they did a personality test on most companies, they came out as sociopaths. They have no guilt, no sense of responsibility, and they're only interested in telling us what to do. And it just rang so true, and it's something that everybody out there needs to get away from. It's very easy to be focused on what your business wants, but what sets us apart as people from how businesses behave in social media and on the web generally is, as people, we're kind of aware of limits, and we don't ask for something without thinking what we're doing in return. Whereas businesses do that all the time, and in some ways, you really do need to think of your business as a person. Think of it as a personality. You could even give it, a famous celebrity who would you ideally have as the spokesman for your brand? And think about why and what their personality traits are, and then try and make sure you show this, you embody this. Manny, I'd like you to kick us off, because I think some people may still be thinking, well, okay, there's different personality types, but they're really just like me and only pretending to be different, right?
No. Different personalities are wired differently all the way down to the synapses, where they're looking at the same thing, and a large part of what they're seeing, well, they're not seeing, is subconscious. It might be that it upsets them and they're not sure why, but what happens is, ever since you're born, the things that you value, you gravitate towards them, and the things that you don't value, you avoid. So the parts of your brain that would recognize things that you don't value, it tends to atrophy. So you don't try to go out of your way to go hang out with people you don't like, which is sort of the best signal for value. And you don't go out of your way to experience things that were toxic or nauseating. But where that becomes a weakness is, like you said, where in the past we had this mindset that we framed everything according to our values coming out of one pipe. One broadcast, one newspaper, one major entity pushing out information. And now we have so many sources of information, and we're becoming aware that the narratives that we were imposing on people were subjugating people and kind of disempowering them, because you looked at the statistics from your point of view and thought about what you wanted out of the relationship, and then you told them that they were the object of your desire instead of the subject of your desire. You never heard their story. No empathy.
Yeah. Go on, Eric.
I was just going to say, I mean, that's a really good example from the outside looking in, but from the inside looking out as well. The sales department wants to increase sales, and so they lean to marketing, and they tell marketing, hey, make us look cool, right? And if marketing doesn't communicate back to sales exactly what they're doing and how they're making the company look cool, and if all of that doesn't filter down to all the different departments, right? Like, if people are out there pushing stuff out on social media, and then people are placing orders, customers are placing orders, and they're getting terrible customer support, or they're getting customer support people or order people or chat people on the web that aren't speaking that same message, it's the same exact issue, only on the inside of that business, right? It has to go, the brand has to go beyond the marketing department.
Yeah. Did you ever see that famous photograph of the early Microsoft team with this very young Bill Gates, and there's all these guys with sandals and beards around him, and it's just such an odd image. Can you imagine those going to the marketing department saying, we want you to make us look cool?
Not so much. Yeah.
Well, I mean, again, coolness may not have been in what they wanted. They may not have been worried about that. I mean, that may have come back to haunt them now.
Yeah, or maybe they look cool to their target audience, because I know when I see that picture, I'm like, dude, look at those ninjas, right? look at those guys.
And
nice. So, has the changes of the last 2 decades really changed the way we frame things? I mean, let's face it, being a nerd or being a geek is cool now, right?
To one psychographic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing more and more of the people who used to be what you'd call cool kids, and they are the surfers, the football players, they're the ones with the model cheekbones and all the rest of it, who are now trying to geek themselves up.
The way I see it is that I don't know if with the internet and how it's all progressed in social, people can connect a lot easier. And I know that's kind of a cliche to say it, but Facebook and all the other social networks has made people get into groups, and so people are cool. People are all right in their own skin a lot more. people are okay being nerds because they can go and converse with other people who have got similar interests. So everybody's, I don't see, I just see that everybody's a lot more happier in their own skin, and they can kind of, congregate with each other. So it's not, it's just not as problematic as it probably used to be.
Yes,
But
you're right.
there's Star Trek nerds, and then there's Apple nerds, right? And they act and dress very, very differently, right?
Yeah.
But if you're a part of that tribe and you can identify with that audience, and if
Yeah,
the
that's
message that's being pushed across, right, and it speaks to you, there you have it. David, you were gonna add something there. Please do.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, first of all, Eric, I'm glad you brought this up, because there is a fragmentation, an increasing fragmentation, which has been brought about by the web, simply because no matter how niche your interest is, the chances of you finding somebody who will reciprocate and you can form a group are increasing incrementally as the connectivity goes up. So this is cool in terms of that. But what Carlos said, essentially, and which feeds into what Manny said beforehand, essentially what Manny described in terms of how personality is formed is data processing. So essentially, you have kind of data which either has a negative or positive impact. And what has increased in our world through connectivity, through social media, through the openness that Carlos talked about, is that data processing has actually got denser. And the more dense it gets, the more granular the picture becomes. So we stop thinking in stereotypes, we stop thinking in black and white, we stop thinking in, hey, the kids in leather jackets out there are bad, and the kids in glasses and holding the books must be clever. We know this is not the case anymore. We actually know that these stereotypes are only superficially right, and there's a greater depth to it, which allows us now to process data differently, which then leads us into different kinds of behavioral changes. So essentially what we see, we consume, and the way we interact begins to change us also, arguably, at a cellular level, because our brain forms new synapses, which allow us to behave differently, which brings us back to whatever happens. When it happens, there's always a reason for it. It's just that we don't always understand that. And this is the same whether it's branding or business or crime in the world, or why bad things happen and why good things don't, or vice versa. There's always something which actually causes something. We just need to understand it better, and data seems to be the key to actually making those connections.
But to carry that metaphor a little bit further and maybe in a slightly different direction, the bandwidth is different. The way we connect to each other may not be as deep. Instead of a direct face-to-face contact and communication, we may feel more comfortable over telephone or through email or in some other way that maybe isn't as rich as it might have been. Some people may feel more comfortable sending out a mass email to a lot of people and talking to them that way, while other people are more comfortable with a face-to-face conversation. So we're getting some benefits over the ability to reach people who may share a lot of common interests, who may just be separated by a lot of miles. But are those connections, are those communications as deep?
Well,
if you give them the time to develop, most communication research will tell you that you can develop the same kind of connections in an online relationship that you do in an offline relationship. You just need to give it more time so that you can get more cues, because you're missing most of the time a lot of the nonverbal cues that you would have in a normal face-to-face situation. So they can develop, you can develop that deep connection. Obviously things like Hangouts are making that easier, but it does require more time.
Do you find, certainly I've found and certain studies have indicated, that people make decisions much faster on fewer clues, and that they let their imaginations or gut instincts guide them more? A particular thing is, people decide they fall in love very quickly on the internet. A few conversations, and wow, we've got so much in common.
It's
sometimes just by email, right?
No, it is true. I quote a lot Walther's hyperpersonal model, and it says that we tend to experience this hyperpersonal connection with other people online. So we kind of exaggerate everything that they do and everything that we do in an online relationship. So over time, we find out more and more about them. But to begin with, yes, we will have a very exaggerated view of them. So, you know, if they immediately come off really like, oh, he's hot, I want to, you know, like we immediately were like, oh my God, I'm in love. And we tend to disclose a lot more online. We will disclose a lot more online up front than we will in a face-to-face situation.
If we're comfortable. If we're really, really comfortable, yeah.
Sometimes people do, Eric. That's not necessarily true. I mean, about the comfort thing. Sometimes people will do it simply because. I mean, what Amon said and what Alex just framed, is that essentially, you know, if we meet in a face-to-face situation, it's a semantically dense situation. There's data coming in from all sorts of things. There's your clothes, the verbal cues, non-verbal cues, there's body language, there's the environmental factors, which also contextualize your presence, which also is a signal. Now we take this into an online situation, and we have a void. And when we have a void, what happens? Rather, instead of not making a judgment call, we actually do, and we make it up. We fill in the blanks. And what we tend to imagine always is what we tend to fantasize about, or, you know, have some sort of imaginary friend kind of thing, which is why in that first instance, you can actually think the connection is a lot more hyper-real and a lot more closer than it would be in real life, simply because it ticks off all the mental boxes which you have created about a person in some kind of setting and environment. So that's why people are willing to divulge a lot more in that kind of situation.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that Ammon and Bill and Carlos as well, and I have had a lot of experiences with forums, right, like threaded discussions. And I know prior to that there was, you know, IRC, and people used to get into these channels and just chat with other people that were extraordinarily like-minded to themselves, right? And, you know, forums can be amazing places. There's always this, you know, weird mix of people that you think are hot or cute, as Alexandra had said, and then there's people who you think are trolls or who are, you know, jerks, right? And then there's people who you think are just insanely intelligent, and you wind up going over to their website, learning more from them. And I think that this is translated now to Facebook, and I think companies are desperate to try and figure out how to tap into that channel. And, you know, Facebook is incredibly personal. You wind up saying things to people that may even not be real-world friends, right? And you know, but you do have to have a filter, because there's going to be people that are going to say, oh, hey, that's a beautiful picture of you. And then there's going to be other people that say, hey, you smell different when you're sleeping. You know, so you've got to kind of balance the creepers and the stalkers versus the people, you know, you got to kind of choose who you're going to connect with.
Now, one thing to consider, though, is that Facebook has your oxytocin at like 150% more. Okay? That means you're in full trust bath.
Huh. That's interesting.
Yep. And another thing is, when you look at someone that you don't know on G+ or even on Facebook, the first thing they show you is how many other people that you know that have trusted this person. And then they show you all the things that you have in common with the person. So then you kind of create this recognition archetype, and you're like, okay, yeah, just like me. And we evaluate people on similarity of values and similarity of tastes, and we kind of imagine the person is closer to us than they really are, with a bolus of information.
So guys, how do companies tap into that without appearing salesy and jerky?
It's an easy one, right? Because I was going to say, every company faces the same thing that every individual faces right now, and that is, how do I actually connect on a shared value basis with my target audience? And the only way to do that is by actually creating a persona or personifying the company. Now, companies are not very good at that, and the reason they're not very good at that is because internally they're not really structured to do this. Their own trust factor is not there. You know, if you're in a legacy company, the first thing that you put on hold is your personality. You never let anybody know what you think. You dress conservatively because it's blunt and you fit in, and certainly you never nail your masts to the wall. Sorry, your colors to the mast, because somebody's gonna have you hide. So they need to change, and I see this in many large corporations which have global bases. that the internal structure head office, you usually get the outposts somewhere, and they're very social media driven, they gung-ho, and they want to try things. And the head office in the States usually says, oh, we're not sure about this, why don't we just do a bit more retargeting? Why don't we get a bit more magazine space? And because that has, it's got the kind of safe zone feel that they feel they can sign off on, whereas everything else is inherently risky, and it also requires change, which can be incredibly disruptive, which can get out of hand, which can then have an impact on the bottom line, and somebody's head is going to roll, which is why companies are so slow at actually coming into this sphere and embracing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
We had a comment. Sorry.
We had a comment from Roy Montero in the audience who said about you can develop the same depth of relationship. He says he forms relationships much faster online. And that's coming back to what I was saying. Part of it is the way that the internet works, that we're presented with lots of our friends' faces, and these all trust this person, so you can trust them too. And look how many people trust this person, so make a quick decision and trust them too. Part of it is that, but part of it is also simply that we deal with written information differently. If you have ever watched a book turned into a movie and seen how different somebody else's perception of that book was from your own, you realise how much of a book is actually going on in our imagination. So imagination.
That's a great example.
Hundreds of blanks, and written communication is still the main form of communication online. So when you're writing, people are seeing traits and personality traits either positively, things that are similar to themselves. They will add more of their own personality into something they like. It must be more like them. And they will, if they dislike something, push more of their opposite traits, the things they don't like, the things they avert on things they don't like. So those kind of things happen. It's a blessing and a curse. On the one side, you can develop trust with people a lot faster online on a lot less cues, but you make mistakes, and those are much bigger. They are much more likely to be instantly seen as setting you apart.
That's very true. There's a polarization taking place, isn't there? You're quite right, because everything is magnified. But to get back to Alex's example, the moment you have any kind of long-term relationship, it tends to create a balance which you can't necessarily get on offline, and it also creates a kind of environment which is a lot more resilient to that kind of interruption. I'll give examples of this. Because Google Plus, we tend to sometimes, or a lot of the times, have in-depth conversations on threads where the opinions which are expressed are not necessarily in total agreement with the original post, and yet you don't get major flame wars. You don't get people cursing at each other or people blocking each other. You don't get any of these things because we tend to look at them and then discuss them, and sometimes we say, maybe I was wrong, and you reposition your argument, or the other person does that, or sometimes when it's a 50-50 thing, you think, well, this is undecided, and that's the way it is, and everybody gets enriched from that. So the moment you understand the value that you get back from a kind of interaction, then you're more likely to engage again in the future, which brings us back to companies, right? Because if you engage in a company thread, what they want to do is say, we are great, this is our stuff, buy it. And you want to say, well, why is your stuff great, and why should I actually buy it from you? And if they can't convince you in that kind of conversation, then they're unlikely to actually get your money. And this is where they begin to project their personality.
So I think one thing that companies often risk doing is thinking, well, okay, so this personality stuff is messy, it's unclear. So shouldn't I go back to that thing of having a clinical, clean, faceless corporation?
No.
That's got to be safer, right?
No, that's death.
Well, I think one is right, and you're right in that companies actually are looking at it. We've been in a social media environment now since 2007. So we've had almost 7 years.
Wait.
Earlier, include IRC, bulletin boards.
Yeah. But from a corporate point of view, when they actually started looking at it. So we started a conversation back then, and we're still trying to decide the ever-recurring question from a corporate point of view: what's the ROI of social media? And we're seeing now that, the global recession pushed a lot of corporations to try things differently because they had to do more with less. So they said, okay, let's try it. We're now beginning to edge out of that global recession. What do we see? Well, we see a pushback. We see companies which traditionally had embraced social media going back to traditional marketing methods. We've got a classic example of Ford, for instance, where Scott Monty has left and the management team have changed, and they're looking back to increasing their traditional marketing budgets because, they used to be a social media company. We see Coca-Cola has kicked back a little bit, and again, they were the innovators on this. And I see it from some of the corporates which I sort of engaged with, that their social media teams are actually now getting, this year, they're getting a little bit smaller. And they're saying, we're going to release some money in the budget to put into traditional advertising because of the last few years we went the other way. And that's, that's their way of testing the water. Should they go back to what it was, which they understand they feel safe with? And that's exactly what Alan said. The danger is I work with the things I know because I feel comfortable doing that and making those decisions. And the messy stuff I don't really want to deal with unless I absolutely have to.
We see that all the time, David. What you're saying about the larger corporations kind of shying away from social media and social media teams shrinking. The way we've tackled it is that we say if you're asking about the ROI in social media, you're asking the wrong question, because it's just so much more than You can say that, but I really feel like that is the wrong question because it all comes back to personality, and it's like Amon said a few weeks ago, there's so many other things that it's hard to gauge the full extent of an ROI. If you're trying to get across, corporate traits and values and things like that, so the way we've done it, with our clients, we've actually stepped up. And we've increased our social media activities for those clients when we've had those conversations and told those larger clients that they're looking at it in the wrong, in that wrong way. One example, it's a regional. I always use the examples of banks, but we have a regional bank that is a client, and we really felt that they needed to get much more feeling of things to do with that particular state. You're not gonna, instead of pushing products all the time, pushing things to do with that particular state, so that the people reading their Facebook post would view them differently than a Bank of America or a Chase that was everywhere. So pushing the
regionality.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. If you go to facebook.com/Flo, the Progressive Girl, Progressive has done a great job with Flo. Most people either love her or hate her. There's not a lot of in between. And if you look at that page, she rarely mentions insurance. She posts snarky, funny, and interesting stuff that matches what they do in the commercials, and it works great for them. They're getting tons of likes, tons of shares, and lots of buzz on that page. I think Flo and Progressive Insurance are doing it right. I really love what they're doing, and I think that's kind of what Carlos is saying in terms of, if you're a Vegas insurance company, you don't just want to push insurance. Talk about the shows, talk about the museums, talk about the events. Take photos of your mascot or your spokesman, with Elvis impersonators or whatever that may be. If you're going to push the vibe that you're fun and engaging and accessible, right? Or if you're going to push a vibe that you're much more corporate and much more organized, you post related news, curate content that's related to Vegas and the markets in Vegas, buying homes in Vegas, getting loans, things like that.
Okay.
So we have a lot of viewers that are small businesses and literally one person businesses. Manny, in that case, is their business persona really their personality, their individual personality, or should they try to cultivate something that is a little bit?
No.
They should probably be working at being a better them. More understanding of others rather than
let me give this as an example. We had one client that was a one-person shop, and we took a look at their Twitter profile and Facebook profile, and they were kind of posting things that kind of bordered, political views and religious views, and we told them, look, there's a place for that, and that's more of a personality thing. If you want to attract more business, it would be better to, that's your personality. But if you really want to attract more business, stay away from the religious stuff, stay away from the political stuff.
But it works so well for the churches and the politicians making all that money.
Okay, all right, but give me, just bear with me 1 minute. If you read, just say that you're a Republican, and then you read these things very democratic on.
You're going to be put off.
You're going to be put off.
You should be, because you're not the target setter. The thing about authenticity is a person uses your brand. They're saying that you share values with them. When McDonald's went out in the hood, and it was sucking money out of the hood, they were like, I'm loving it. And then they went and found another phrase. They found another phrase, I'd hit that. Then they said that about a burger. You don't say that about a burger. You say that about the young lady working on a pole,
Burger fetishistic people too.
The thing is that the money doesn't belong to you if you don't like the people. You don't want to be working with people that you don't like. And that's one of the problems I had with medicine, was that we'd be sitting there across the table telling someone they didn't have good coping skills.
I think that all depends on how much you want. I mean, I can, I've got political views, and I'm a very, as Eric will tell you, I'm a very, very political person. But I can work with every stripe, and
Yeah.
I mean, I agree with you. You want to be able to, try to work with people who have got certain values that align with yours. But I don't see religion and politics. I think
we've always kept it far, far away from our own business. Yeah. We've always recommended our clients do the same. But I understand what you're saying, Manny. I mean, there's going to be people who want to work with a landscaper who's, Christian
from their church.
Yeah.
It's a trust thing. They're under the politics, under liberal and under like Republican, like conservative, are openness to change, which is universal values, and conservation, which are universal values. And if someone under their talk is conservative, they're conservative across the board, and they're going to be saying stuff along the way to violate trust, like on a subliminal level. So you don't have to say
I don't know, man. Internally, we call computers devil's boxes here at ISOOSI, and you would never know it by doing business with us. No, I'm totally kidding. We don't.
We now have to sacrifice an extra chicken.
Right. It has to be a lamb, right? At least.
Right. Yeah, it's got to be a lamb so that Carlos can make that famous curry he has.
So, brilliant.
In the audience, we have this very nice chap who I haven't actually got to talk with firsthand yet, but I think Manny knows him, called Craig Calvert, and he's throwing these 4-letter acronyms around.
Yeah, that's my
Myers-Briggs personality types.
Yeah.
Where I want to tie this in is, we're talking about different kinds of content that you can post that works, but part of this is knowing what's going to work for you. I mean, there's no point if you look like the average stereotypical stockbroker, you trying to talk about surfing, because it's just not going to come across as that believable, especially if it isn't one of your interests. So how does your own personality type, what are the personality types, and how does this tie into our strengths and weaknesses, and then coming up with a strategy?
Okay, your personality type comes through in every word you say. A person who is, I'll use extreme examples. I'm an ENTP, which means the N means that I'm intuitive. The T means that I prefer models, like mathematical models, to someone who would say an ENFP would be more about emotions and the group ethos. The P means that I'm open to change. I'm more about cognitive flexibility than about sticking to the structures. Now, when you're dealing with someone who is from outside your personality group, and I like just to core the 2 letters just to get an idea, because it's simpler. When someone is from outside your personality group, their whole set of what they value is entirely different. You're talking to this person about freedom and a chance to express themselves, and they're like, no one should express themselves. They should be behaving like tradition. Your personality comes across in your tense. People who are intuitive, we speak in the future, we speak in the abstract, and David will tell you all the time, he's like, something implementable, something concrete. Whereas another personality that's kind of on the other side from mine, and my wife is ESTJ. The S means sensing, and they want pragmatic stuff. When you ask any STJ to evaluate something, that person is looking at past performance. When you ask me to evaluate something, I'm looking at the pattern and anticipating what the person will do in the future. So tenses they use, a sensing person, when they look at something, they tend to look at the entities within it. Whereas an intuitive person looks at the pattern, and even if you took out the things, like if you move the chairs out and you replace tables, I would still be like, oh, you're doing that pattern. Whereas somebody who had taken the time focusing all on the chairs, now they're like, well, you messed up my flow. You know, there's different levels of abstraction that people process reality, and that affects how you recognize things because it affects how you encode your memories. And a brand has to communicate to everyone who has sort of a particular interest in their lane of signaling.
Okay, so this is a communication thing, and I should be kicking this to Alex, or is this a relationship thing, and I should be kicking this over to David? I mean,
well, I think it's a bit of both, really, isn't it? Because you can't have a relationship unless you're able to frame the conversation and reach some middle ground. Otherwise, what are you basing it on? And this is the difficulty of the marketing world we're in right now, because what used to be fairly straightforward and black and white now isn't. You know, you start talking about marketing and you need to actually have a good grasp of psychology, both yours and your target audience. You need to have a good grasp of how you actually form the new reality you're in. What are your cultural triggers? What are your signifiers? How are these going to be interpreted? And it gets a little bit tricky because companies are not very conversant with this kind of methodology and language internally. And again, it's very disruptive. You know, you mentioned small businesses. Yes, they're ideally placed to capitalize on this because usually there's 1 or 2 people and they can get together around a beer and say, you know, what are our core values? Where do we draw the line? What do we really stand for? And then they can ask, how do we communicate this? Well, you can't do this inside a company. You have to devise different ways of doing it, you know, different kinds of methodologies and different ways of actually communicating within the different departments. Still doable, takes longer, but that's the real challenge. And, you know, Alex beautifully in many of the posts he puts out and the hangouts we do together, we discuss how communication takes place. And communication is key because it allows brand values to be created, entities to be formed, search to be to function properly because you can get the data it needs. So these are the soft skills which lead to very hard metrics at the end of the day once you do them properly.
I think, you know, from my experience as well with larger companies, it's the HR departments that need to learn more about. I mean, marketing is one thing, but who puts the marketing people in the marketing positions is HR. So you have to have the human resources people being able to identify the correct type of people and the personalities to put in those positions to kind of get the core brand values out.
Yep, exactly.
Very cool. I'm loving this discussion. So, guys, we do have about 15 minutes left. Again, if you've joined us late, you're on another awesome Tuesday ISOOSI Hangout, and we're talking about all sorts of awesome and deep stuff that I don't quite understand, but I'm taking notes. That's not true. I understand a little bit of it. So we have some great questions, guys. If you have questions you'd like to ask the panel, please do it now. Really good question here from Cheryl. She wants to know, can a business have different areas of connection so that you can reach all types instead of narrowing it down to just one particular type?
You know, that's come up before in actually boardroom meetings I've actually been present at. And what I usually say there is that, you know, there's a Chinese proverb that says, a friend to everybody is a friend to nobody. And I think it really typifies the kind of thinking that suggests you shouldn't do it. You really need to actually drill down into what is your core audience and expand from there a little bit. But to try and say, we speak for everybody, well, you think, how is that possible? I mean, nobody's going to believe it, let alone you. And that's the faulty position to start from.
Okay, I think there is actually a way around that, which is quite nice. I mean, if you've got a large enough company, this is where the small business doesn't get a look in as much. But you've got a large company, there is a design department, there is a legal department, there's an accounting department. We're talking 4 different personality types here already. We're talking about role models for different personality types here. And, you know, so if you let these people have their own access to being talking about, you know, what they're loving about what they're designing, how they put different processes and thought into how this product will look, how it will feel, those sensory, you know, feely things, great. That is already appealing to one personality type, and it's just exactly what they are looking for in this product. And, you know, another side of it is you've got this very techie person who's talking about the tight tolerances and it's all about the performance. That's those results-driven people. You know, you want to know that this product is going to work, and here's how they've gone about doing everything they can to make this product as efficient as is humanly possible. Great, it's the best on the market, I will buy one immediately. And having all of these different abilities is great. You can get all that in there. So is there a way that a smaller business can communicate in a similar way and be open to more people than just themselves? Alex?
I think as someone that is the voice of a very small business, SEO-wise is literally two of us right now. It's just me and John Ellis, and John is not allowed to touch the account unless he tells me. I'm very protective of it. I think you can, as long as you approach the situation with openness. That is what I have found. The more open I am when I represent the brand and myself, because most people connect me with the brand, if you approach any conversation, any situation with openness, yeah, you may not hit every personality type, and as most of you know, I recently learned you can't make everybody happy, but as long as you approach it with openness and you really show a sense of honesty with the brand, you develop so much more trust, so much faster than if you're really, if you're really targeting a specific audience and you're so focused on your goal that you're not really noticing the people on the periphery of that specific goal. That's what. So I think there is a way to connect with people that don't necessarily fit your personality type. I would stress, be very careful of fragmentation. That is something that I'm very protective of SEO-wise. I want it to have a very specific voice, so that's why I'm so protective of it. Fragmentation can be a very, very scary thing. So when I hear you talking about 4 different people, great. Just make sure that in all of their messages, they can put in all their personalities, but make sure they all still have that same core value expressed in their messages. And then I think you'll kill it as a brand.
Yeah, I think the goal is to have all those different people represent the brand the way they see fit to their departments, right, internally, but the brand that's being communicated outside the company is very carefully managed. I mean, I think both should be managed, but this is what Ammon had said earlier in the Hangout in terms of letting people paint their own picture, paint their own book, and leads really well to a talking point that Bill had raised, which is who sets the core values of a company. Is it collaborative or is it through a leader? And I think if it's through a leader, you have to be very, very careful because you're going to have to get buy-in. You're going to have to get buy-in so that the different department heads, like Ammon had said, who all speak sort of different languages, you've got your analytical people over here, your creative people over here, as long as they understand the core values and can communicate them to their teams in their own way while still kind of upholding that message, I think that's going to work great. But what do you guys think? Who sets the value of this company? Are you looking to a leader, or is it more of a collaborative environment?
I would
Let me see if Bill has an answer to his own question. Because since you brought up the great question, it's only fair to let Bill have first crack at it.
Great, good. Okay, so I worked in a courthouse. We had lots of people working there, including people from each court representing different ideas, different needs, different concepts, and they had different goals. So we had a group meeting within our court where we were talking about a change management process, except the guy who was like the highest level guy there, one of the judges who was management, he saw the title of the group and he said, "Is this about me? Are you guys trying to get somebody new involved here?" This change management. So we weren't on all the same page, and when we explained that to him, it was more about teaching everybody within the organization how things would change, he felt a whole lot more comfortable with that, and we continued to collaborate and share ideas rather than just let him take over because he maybe felt pressured to. But seen lots of instances where people who maybe weren't the highest ranking person in their organization be the voice of it, like Robert Scoble was for a number of years from Microsoft, where he sort of took a position as a lead blogger talking to the public about things that Microsoft was doing, and didn't always agree with the direction that the company as a whole seemed to be taking. He humanized it a lot.
The problem with that was it kind of felt hollow in that, yeah, this guy's out there and he's talking a lot, but I'm not seeing Microsoft actually buying into anything their own mouthpiece is saying. And at least that's how it felt to me. Manny, I know you wanted to jump in on this as well.
Yeah,
It came across that way sometimes, but yeah.
I think an organization should have a narrative that everyone buys into. And one of the things they're saying about the millennials is that they want to work for a company that has a cause, that has a meaning. I mean, if you want a sustainable organization, you want everyone to sort of feel as if the little piece that they're doing is helping some sort of sense of self, some sort of entity moving towards a larger goal. That's how you would have healthier, more intrinsically motivated employees.
Is that the official neuroscience description of what we are? We're each narratives?
Well, no, we're each part of a narrative.
We're each telling stories to ourselves and each other?
Yeah, and each of us thinks that by joining a group, you go through assimilation within the group, you take the group culture, and you use that as the archetypes, and you compare your ideal, you compare that as your ideal, and it's called a reference group. So you're like, am I living up to my group's expectations? If you feel like you're on the edge of the group, you have low self-esteem, and then you become more likely to point to what's wrong with the other group. So to feel better, that's your whole racism mechanism, you know? Like the group develops in-group bias. The group sees more details about the group, they identify with it, and then you have some people within the group that individuate. They notice that they want to grow the group as a sort of as a corpus into something higher, and that would end up being the leader within the collective.
Cool.
The process that Mani just described essentially is identity formation. And identity is a construct which is part of an ongoing, ever-developing narrative, which comes from the social environment and the contextual pressures that are applied to it. So essentially it comes back down to entities and search and brand and identity, and the values which develop because of that are identity-born values, because this is exactly what allows the narrative to take place, this is what allows the group norms to take place, and this is what allows the connections outside the company to actually take place. So it comes back down to that original soft skill that we were discussing, or soft metric of who are you? And if you can't answer that as a business internally, you haven't got a snowflake's chance in hell rather, to actually communicate that successfully outside the company. And again, it's a process that needs to take place in order for you to actually have the kind of brand that is informed by values and is constantly evolving and developing in tune with its target audience. So that's the kind of process that you need to put in place through methodologies which are usually corporate, but in a small business it's really easy, right? You get together with a friend and you say, we'll have a couple of drinks and we're going to decide who the hell are we really and why are we doing this job.
What's important is when people use your product in public and people see them, they're saying something. When I roll up in an oversized, a Humvee or whatever, a Hummer or whatever, and I know that gas is $5 an hour, and $5 a gallon, and I'm like, whatever, it's saying something. When I have a Confederate flag, I'm in the South, so that's the example. When it comes out and I have my flag, I'm telling you something very specific, and people get a visceral response, and they know who they're dealing with. So brands, basically, you have to. I think one thing they said is that you have to go from thinking of the hero's journey as you being the hero to the customer being the hero, and you're a tool. You're a mentor. You're something that the customer uses to make the journey. You're a part of his symbolic self-completion.
Yeah.
And that's a mental leap, isn't it, really? Because it used to be, and if you're in business, what did you want to do? You wanted your customers to behave the way you want them to behave so they could give you their money. And if you're in business today, what do you want to do? You want your customers to see you as a solution to a particular problem. And that's the win. I mean, if we think of Google, right, what do they try to do? They try to answer very specific questions in our lives. Search does that. YouTube video does that. Semantic technologies which they implement, like Google Maps and Google Now, they attempt to do that. And the moment they do that, we stop thinking of the traditional consumer product kind of interface. It becomes part of our lives, and it becomes more integrated to the narratives we create for ourselves. They become part of our identity. That's the biggest win for a brand. It's incorporated who you are.
David,
Then it's part of you.
Just on that quick, David, just on that point, I know we're coming up to the, but with a company like Google that is just so big, with some of these companies that do things like, for example, let me just Google Maps. How many people use that, and it's they don't pay anything. It's a free service, and how many people, So my point being is, does Google over the years, have they kind of done things that were, obviously like analytics, free services? Have they kind of consciously done that just so that they can, increase the spread? I mean, has that been a conscious?
Well, there's always a tempting thing to think that free is easy, and it's not actually, because the moment something is free, the first question that pops in somebody's mind is what is its real value? Because free is valueless. You think, oh yeah, it's always there. So really, in order to win with free, you need to actually work harder to communicate the value that item has in the life of somebody. And that's what Google does consistently. And this is where they kill some, because they work very hard and they put them out there, and the uptake is really poor because either their take on this was, when they created them, was not what it should be, or their communication skills are not there, and people don't accept them. So they kill them because they need to focus on the stuff that works. And once you have that integration in somebody's life, then it becomes easier for you to think, okay, now we have integration, how do we monetize it? Where is the next point where people think, it's so cool, now I'm willing to pay the extra thing?
I'm just wondering if they could kind of consciously, I mean, in essence, they're a data company, right? And so analytics, they're getting vast amounts of data, even Google Plus, and that's what they're about. I mean, I'm just wondering, I'd love to have been a fly in the wall at some of the kind of meetings when some of these projects were in concept phase, and I'm just wondering, have they consciously gone about it thinking, all right, we're going to get this data, and that's been the driver, or has something else been a driver that's a core value to them that we don't know about? I mean,
well, if we go from all the stuff which we do know about Larry Page and Sergey Brin, who basically informed the values of the company at startup level, their idea of a business was to do something different. Instead of selling something, is to get people to buy into something, which then they would be able to sell something else on top of it. And that's what they constantly do. And that is actually harder to do. It's like, for instance, somebody saying, let's assume that somebody wants to become a politician, they want to become president of the United States, and he says, well, I need a lot of votes. And traditional mechanism is I have a lot of money, and I package my version, and I sell it out there, and people buy it because it's expensive, and I get elected. Or you can do it the other way around. You can meet everybody in the country, shake their hand, listen to their story, get them to like you. That's a lot harder to do. It would get you there, right, theoretically. But how much harder is that? And essentially, that is the thinking that informed Google's initial uptake. It was a very disruptive way of thinking at the time.
We really need to kind of wrap this show up, and I know it's difficult. I know we could all keep going for hours yet. I want to thank everyone in the audience. I know we haven't had a working comment tracker today, but there have been fantastic questions coming all the way through. We will be jumping into the thread, answering as many as we can, because there have been some absolute gem questions in there. For now, let's kind of do a wrap up, and for those who have sat through the whole hour, I like to always add something at the end. It's a particular value. So going with the two things we like to do, we like to kind of do the big picture stuff and something practical. So for the big picture thing, I think we have a tradition in philosophy of people, you know, why are we here? And I've always felt that the answer to that isn't set. The answer is you're here to ask yourself that question and find your own answer. So understanding who your business is and what it stands for is the question you should be asking yourself. And there's no right answer, there's your answer. The answer you create is going to define your company. And for the really practical thing, I'd like to point out that, you know, a core advantage that ISOOSI has always had is that Carlos and Eric are two different personality types, and that one can appeal to one kind of client, another to another, and between them they cover a lot of things. So think when you're building up partnerships, when you're coming to arrangements with people, and even with certain missionary types that your business can build up, look for those other personality types. Don't just look for somebody who's the same as you. Find those other personality types and empower them to speak the things that you can't for you. Alex, ladies first.
What do I say?
Give us a roundup. Anything you'd like to say before we go off air?
Oh, anything. Oh, wow. Ooh, dangerous. The only thing I'd like to say is that just keep representing yourself. I am a personal brand, and I'm also SEO wise. I do some other branding for other brands on Google+. But as long as you stick to certain values that fit your brand, you're good to go. And always, always, always think about the way you're communicating.
Awesome, awesome. David.
Well, I was going to say, everybody said so many things in such an incredibly granular way. I mean, just think before you act, and then think how you're going to get those thoughts translated into actions. And if you do that, you rarely go wrong.
Absolutely, absolutely. Manny?
Things are changing, and they're changing fast. Darwin, you know, what has worked in the past won't necessarily work in the future, or it might not be working now, and you just got your head in the sand. So it's time to adapt.
Cool. Bill?
At Go Fish Digital, we pay a lot of attention to how people are represented in search engines, not only from a reputation management standpoint, but from search results, in knowledge bases, on their own web pages. And we try to work with people to help them present themselves in as positive a light as possible to as many people who are interested in what they do as possible.
Cool. Eric?
Yep. As a final thought, I guess I would only add that, you know, guys, this stuff is very, very important. And so you don't necessarily need to turn yourself into Manny or David and dig as far down the rabbit hole as you possibly can. It's just like SEO. At the very least, you need to understand enough about it to hire an expert and be able to communicate with them. So if this isn't your particular thing, just know how critically important it is to make sure that your brand is represented internally and externally from the top down, so that even people with different personality types can speak the truth of your company and not make you look bad. Because as Ammon has mentioned many times now over the course of our Hangouts, all it takes is one slip-up to do an incredible amount of damage. Years of work can be undone with one mistake. So thank you guys for joining us. That would be it. Carlos, anything you want to add?
No, I just want to thank everybody. Thank Alex, Ammon, Bill, David, Manny, everybody. Thanks to all the viewers for tuning in again. The only thing I'd like to add really is, you know, as well as the marketing aspects, is, you know, again, we brought it up before, hiring the right people that have got shared values. They don't have to be the same personality as you. You know, having a company with 6 people all the same is going to be a very boring company. It's like Eric and I, as different as you can possibly get, but we've got shared values, and we found a way for it, you know, just like Abbott and Costello. We've got a very great relationship, and that shows through to all our clients. You know, we respect each other, and then that, you know, transpires to you know, it gets communicated to our clients.
I was more thinking Batman and Robin. I got to be honest with you. I never really thought Abbott and
I'll be
Costello.
Batman. I'll be Batman. That's it.
Exactly. That makes him Batman. Do you really want to be Robin?
Hey, Robin never gets the credit he deserves. That's all I'm going to say about that. So, guys.
But yeah, thanks. Yeah, like I was just about to say, thanks, guys, for everybody here, and thanks for tuning in. And we'll see you again next Tuesday, 3 p.m. Eastern. Thanks, everybody.
Take care. Bye-bye.
And I can't turn it off.